What's up, everybody? Welcome to the One Fun Guy podcast. Tonight, my
Hello.
guest is Alison. Alison, just introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit about yourself, and we'll get into it.
Hi, guys. I'm from Australia. So my name's Alison. I am a counselor, therapist. I have been in the industry for close to 20 years. And in the past 3 years, I've set up my own private practice, which specializes in working specifically with men in the areas of mental health, relationships, and family and domestic violence. Um, and we're also like a teaching practice. So I'm really proud of like the work that we do. And yeah, I just thought it would be an interesting conversation to have with you today.
Absolutely. So let's start from there. What made you want to do your own practice versus working for somebody else in a company? What kind of was your headspace when you
Mm.
decided you were going to branch out?
Yeah, great question. Actually, it was like one of those really weird um, moments in your life where you just have this gut intuition. So I was basically working for a company which was a not-for-profit in the not-for-profit sector. And my contract was up for renewal, and I was working with men in that space. So I've been working with men at that point for about 8 years, 7 years. Yeah, 7.5 years. And my contract was up for renewal, but they wanted to put me into a completely different counseling section, which was like the gambling section or, working with women, which I wasn't really comfortable with either because especially gambling, I can't relate. Like if I win like $2 on a scratchy, I'm taking that scratchy home. I am not like partying with this $2. I'm like, thank you, sir, for the $2. That was free money. That's how I'm concerned, with this. So I couldn't relate to gambling. Um, and I was just kind of like, I do good work with the men. And then one of the criticisms that I got was like, well, there was two. One was like the older counselors, like the women counselors, would say to me things like, "Oh, the men only come and talk to you because you're pretty." And I'm like, "Oh, okay, right, cool. Fuck my 3 degrees, right? Like, no big deal. Like, yeah, all that debt that I'm in now. Yes, it's absolutely my looks that they're coming for, 100%." And then, that kind of went up to management. And then management were like, your clients that call up, they're quite frequent and they're always calling up. They're wanting to speak to you. What are you doing? Like, are you crossing boundaries with them? I'm like, yes, I'm having sex with all my male clients. That is what I do. That's how I do behavior change with them. Don't, so it's crazy. I
Sure.
was like, no, they're only calling up because they want to do therapy. This is the first time in their life maybe they feel heard and listened to, right? Or seen. And so they're calling up to do extra sessions. It doesn't mean that I'm crossing boundaries. And I just really wasn't happy with the not for profit sector, to be honest with you. Like in Australia, I think we've spoken about it before. Like, I'm not sure how it 100% is in the US, but in Australia, we have some really negative stereotypes around family and domestic violence in particular,
Sure.
and men. There's always that language from like the justice model, which is like perpetrator and victim, and these
Mhm.
men are like these monsters that are coming out and doing the domestic violence and running away kind of thing, right? And so there's like limited resources out there for them. Like there's only like so my private practice is the one of a kind in all of Western Australia, which is where I'm from, that actually runs a men's behavior change program. Aside from me, there are only three other organizations, and they all have like a 6 to 8 month wait list. And most of them, you have to actually, in your first appointment, sort of say that you're a perpetrator, and you have to admit that you are a perpetrator, and sort of, and if you're
Okay.
not able to do that, then you don't get the support. So I
Right.
kind of branched out because of all the kind of gaps that I saw in the system and how I could sort of work in that system and create my own program. So that's kind of what I did. I quit my job. I called my then husband, who's now my ex-husband, because all dreams also come at a price, right, and sacrifice.
Sure.
So I called my then husband. I was like, I quit my job today. And he's like, what? And I'm like, yeah, so funny story. Ha ha ha. And then like he's like, oh, that's okay. Like, whilst you're looking for other work, I'll take up some extra hours at work and we'll sort of manage. And I was in that adrenaline rush when I quit my job. And then I get to my car and then I'm like, what the fuck did I just do? So I sat in my
Mhm.
car panicking for the next hour and a half, like Googling jobs, job searching. But then after the panic sort of subsided and I listened back to my gut and my instinct, It took me back to like why I actually do want to start my private practice, which is to actually help men, to help them be seen
Sure.
and heard. And so that's kind of how it all started.
Awesome. So walk us through the time you quit your job to the time you opened your door. What were some things you needed to do? Obviously, you need an office space, right? You have to
Yeah.
have certain things. How did you go about finding the place? Like, what made you feel comfortable in the environment you were at versus other
Hmm.
ones? I'm sure you probably looked at several pieces of real estate of where you
Hmm.
wanted to go. Like, walk us through the process from the time you're sitting behind the wheel in your car to the time you open the door. Kind of bring us to how that happened, if you can.
So basically, after the panic subsided, like I said, I have ADHD, which I've also spoken to you about, and I went into sort of that ADHD hyper zone. And in like period of 1 month, I created like a 22-week men's behavior change program, and that included like the website, um, all the forms, all the policies and procedures. I even looked at hiring staff, but I had nowhere to kind of sort of set down. So, and I wanted to be quite central in the city to allow men who came straight from court to kind of come to us. So it'd be central. They're not having to travel far. And
Mhm.
I couldn't really find something that I could afford because when I quit my job and I started my business, I didn't actually take out any loans and I didn't have a huge savings.
Okay.
I just had my tax money that had come in that year. And that was all I had, which was like a few grand. I think it was like 2 or 3 grand.
Sure.
So I was sort of like, I had I had a plan, I had the program, I had 3 clients who were going to follow me from my last job to, my business, and that was all I had. And I remember going in and talking to my clinical supervisor at the time and, telling him that I quit my job and I'm not sure what to do and should I go back to like other not-for-profits? Like, would that be easier? Should I listen to my gut and stick with the program? And he had just retired that year because he'd had a stroke and he had to retire because he has some brain damage and you can't practice, whilst
Mhm.
you have whilst you're impaired. Also, guys, please bear with me. I am losing my voice. I have lost my voice this week, but it's getting better. So just bear with me.
Sure, sure. Take your time.
Yeah. So yeah, I was talking to my clinical supervisor and telling him about like, my plan, but then my like insecurities and massive imposter syndrome and all that kind of stuff. And he just kind of said to me, well, if you really want to practice and you really truly believe in this program and I can see you're passionate about it, why don't you just set up office in my practice? Because I've obviously retired this year and I only potter around because he's 80 years old.
Sure.
He said, I just potter around the office to kind of stay away from my wife. So, you can have it 3 days a week if you'd like. And I was just absolutely in awe and shock because my clinical supervisor, so I created a men's behavior change program in private practice. He, in conjunction with another social worker, created a men's behavior change program for child sex offenders. And so he's quite well known in Perth because, like, if there's any men that are kind of going on trial, either for the prosecution or for the defendant, he would do reports, see the men, all that kind of stuff. So sort of have his space and to be working from that space was huge. Um, and so it was like this massive dream moment. Sorry, guys, my laptop's about to die. Let me just plug it in. Um, yeah, it was this massive like dream to be sharing this space with like a legend in the field in the industry.
Okay.
Um, and so yeah, he was even the day he said to me, "You can even scrape my name off the glass and stick your name up there." I was almost in tears because I was like, Jesus Christ. Sorry.
Right.
Alarm's going off. I'm so sorry, guys. It is like 7:30 over here. I'm still kind of half waking up, losing my voice. Laptop's dying. We're gonna work with it.
Yeah, you're doing
Um,
great.
yeah, but yeah, so to even like scrape his name off and put my name on that glass door was so momentous to me. Like I remember I was almost in tears because it was almost like this huge like passing down of a crown in some ways, to just say, and it was very close to the city, it was affordable. And then then I practiced there for 2 years, and then we grew and grew, and staff grew, and in some ways, like he would still potter around the office, and that wasn't really always great, because he was also taking up like space of a staff could be.
Mhm.
So we then branched out onto like a different office, which is now even closer to the courts and stuff like that. And I grew from 3 clients and just myself doing all the running around to now having 3 workers that work under me, students that come and do their prac placements with me, like their internships, and we have like from 3 clients to now I'm working 5 day or 6 days a week now
Sure.
with like 5 clients a day usually. So yeah, we grew pretty quickly, and yeah, it's huge when I think about it. But I think I was also in that very big hyper focus mode, ADHD hyper focus. So when I look back even now, I almost can't remember those moments, but I know I
Sure.
did it because I did it.
Right.
That makes sense. Yeah.
So if our viewers are watching and they are maybe in the middle of a transition like you were in, what advice would you give somebody that is kind of on the cusp of maybe starting their own business or leaving a practice to go on their own? Like what would you say to them like in terms of some advice that you could give them or maybe like a little bit of motivation if they're kind of on that fence?
I mean, I guess I can just speak from my experience, and there'll be 3 things. Number one is trust your gut instinct, because if you want to step out or stay, trust your gut and really listen to it. Number two, be realistic of your expectations. There's no point just going, oh yeah, I'm going to set up my business, I'm going to set up my practice, and everything's going to be hunky dory. Like it's not all sunshine and roses and daisies. So you have to be realistic
Sure.
about the ups and the downs. And the third is, if you're in particular, if you're a therapist, make sure that you have the relevant experience and the relevant qualifications, because when you are working for yourself, it is a very lonely space when you're first starting out. Like when I was working for other companies, like if I was bored or if I had to pick someone's brain about a client, I would just turn my head and be like, hey, Sarah, blah, 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 blah. Or hey, Kirsty, blah, 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 blah. Now
Hmm.
I was on my own. There was no one to talk to bounce ideas off. So I had to rely on like my therapeutic knowledge and my therapeutic skills. So
Sure.
I think, yeah, it's be realistic. Make sure you have the relevant knowledge, qualifications, and trust your gut.
Awesome. All right. So now let's rewind all the way to your 18-year-old self. What made you
Mhm.
want to get into helping other people, being a therapist? Like what as a student made you say this is what I want to pick for my career?
I actually wanted to be a lawyer when I was growing up. Funny
Okay.
story. Um, but to get into law over here, obviously maybe the same in the US, you need a very high score in your exams. In year 11 and 12. Um, and I was like never diagnosed with ADHD, and the pressure got to me so much, and I didn't understand why my brain wasn't coping. And in year
Hmm.
12, my final year, I had a bit of a massive meltdown. Like I had these massive anxiety attacks, panic attacks. I just froze up, couldn't study for the exams. Yeah, like my world collapsed around me, and I couldn't understand what was happening.
Sure.
And everyone just kept saying I had anxiety, but I knew it wasn't just anxiety. But anyway, so I didn't get the marks that I wanted for law. And so the next best thing was my mum had works in the community services industry. And so I'd been around that since I was a child. Like my mum, I was like a latchkey kid. She'd leave me in the house or she'd take me to work, and I'd be
Hmm.
sitting there. For the viewers that are like, millennials, you'll remember like the worm game, or like the little minesweeper, or like
Hmm.
Tetris, and you'd be spending that yeah, full 8 hours on that because your parents just left you on a computer at their work with like no Wi-Fi or internet connection. So I just kind of grew up in that space, so I gravitated towards that. And initially, I was a social worker.
Okay.
And I did that for close to 10 years, working with families in the mental health space, also helping people get into employment, that kind of stuff. But then I kind of got to the point in my second pregnancy where I was like, I don't want to be 60 or 65 and still be running around in the car, like taking clients to appointments or advocating or picking
Hmm.
up food hampers. I can't keep this level of energy. So then I was like, I think I need to like change tact and course a little bit. And that was when I thought about what else I could do. And that's when counseling kind of came about for me. Um, and yeah, so I enrolled into my master's in counseling and fell into men's work, like just by accident.
Sure.
Yeah, because my family contract was ending. The family's mental health contract was ending. And I was talking to my manager at the time about the work I was doing in my master's and understanding the role of shame and how understanding about trigger clients and how my trigger clients used to be like working with men, but I feel like it's not anymore because of the work I'm doing in my master's, etc. And she just suggested that I sit in on a few groups with the perpetrators of domestic violence and see what that's like. And then yeah, I just kind of fell into that. So my 18-year-old self did not
Okay.
have any clue of what she wanted. It was just like fluke after fluke after fluke.
And sometimes those are the best choices, right? Like things kind of don't work out for one thing and then they work out for something else and you kind of make a go of it, right? So that's
Organized
normal, I
chaos,
think,
my
for
friend.
I mean, there's
Absolutely.
very small percentage of the population, I think, around the globe where a child at 6 years
Mm,
old says, I'm going to be this, and they
mm,
actually go through and that's what they end up doing, right? Most
yeah.
people at 5, 6, 7 years old, when they give you those aptitude tests, they say, what do you want to do? And they're like, oh, I want to be a rocket scientist. I want to be an astronaut, or I want to be a
Yeah.
professional football player or
I wanted
professional
to be a
athlete, right?
singer. I
Right.
wanted to
So
be a
like,
singer and I can't even sing. So, that was always an out for me.
you're
It's
right.
like, come on. My parents didn't even like fact check me. They just put me in
Yeah.
choir and singing lessons, knowing I couldn't sing. They
Right.
set me up. Failure.
So yeah, so that always is the best. So let's talk about now. You have the office, right? You're doing your
Hmm.
clinicals, you have your patients, you have your clients, you have all
Hmm.
of this stuff. How do you manage client services versus their expectations of what reality really is? Do you have a measure that you go on for them, or kind of walk us through when somebody sits down in front of you for the first time? How do
Yeah.
you get, like, how does that session start?
So usually, it's what I call like almost like profiling the man when he walks in. So I do pattern-based recognition. So profiling whether they're an avoidant attachment or an anxious attachment, and depending on what sort of attachment style they are, I will kind of tailor the approach for them. So if it's an anxious person, it's about like reassuring them, scaffolding them, um, you know, checking their expectations. And I'm very blunt and honest to be honest. Like,
Mhm.
I'll just call a spade a spade. So, scaffolding a lot, but also fact checking them is how I'd work with an anxious man. Whereas an avoidant man, it's about pulling out like emotions from him and getting him to reconnect like head and heart, because a lot of avoidant men I find are all very logical and in their head. So it's about, getting them to connect back to their younger selves and connect back to their head and heart. And that's kind of how I manage the expectations. We also do family therapy, funny enough, now, like court ordered family therapy.
Okay.
That's a lot harder. I find
Sure.
that quite challenging. Like, yesterday was a day.
Yeah.
Honestly, it was like between lawyers emailing you and then the clients emailing you, like with the men in the men's group or men's counseling, like they'll do their intake and then they'll jump into the group or they'll jump into individual sessions, and then that's pretty much it. You're golden, right? Whereas with family therapy, you're like negotiating with lawyers, you're negotiating with two parties that hate each other, then you
Sure.
negotiating with like the children and the two parties and then the lawyers, and it is chaos. But that's probably what I find a lot more challenging than working with men, to be honest. Yeah.
Okay. Now, when you get this is just kind of for my own question. When you
Hmm.
get a person that's sitting in front of you, are they relatively open right off the bat? Do they shut down? How do they respond to you and your questions? Are they an open book, or are they kind of like you have to work through them?
Yeah, yeah. I love that question. I would say my counseling style or my intake style when I first meet a man was almost developed through baptism by fire. So when I first started in like the role working for the Department of Justice, subcontracting in the company that I was working for, you would have an hour and a half to meet a random man you've never met. You just get his statement of material facts from the police of the domestic violence incident, and you had to kind of figure out what happened, his understanding of the offending, whether he had victim empathy and perspective taking, did he have the skills to do conflict management safely, what were his pro-social factors, what was his risks of recidivism, and you had to figure that all out in an hour and a half. So I got pretty good quite quickly at
Hmm.
being able to read men. I think I've always been able to do that, like read people, but I started using my powers, so to speak, for good, and like kind of tailoring it for the man, and kind of just sometimes it would feel like juggling knives while trying to ride a unicycle. When I
Sure.
first started trying to get the information out of them, but now I find it quite easy to do it.
Okay. Let me ask another question. I don't know if you can answer it based off
Hmm.
of, your, work and stuff like that. How does Australia treat their veterans? Do you get a lot of ex-military guys coming in that are kind of in a bad headspace and have domestic issues? Are they courteous to them? Are they like, because in the United States it's very difficult, right? Because they
Hmm.
don't address those things coming out of combat,
Yeah.
and especially guys that have been in the military longer and longer that have seen
Mm.
more and more things. We have the VA hospital here, which is the Veterans Affairs,
Hmm.
but it takes time. There's not that many, and a lot of veterans that their number one complaint is that they can't get scheduled to see anybody. And
Hmm.
a lot of the stuff that's court ordered is because they've gotten in trouble because they didn't get the help they needed when they got out.
We
How is it
needed
in
it.
Australia? Is it
You
the
know,
same? Is it
so when I came to the US about 12 years ago, no, 13 years ago, I saw a lot of the veterans on the street. Like they'd be like begging, like panhandling, all that kind of stuff. And it broke my heart because it's like you kind of gave your life up for this country. Some of them were like disabled because as a result of that, had like blown off limbs and stuff. And they were begging on the streets. And it blew my mind, and I thought to myself, Australia, like we must be better than that, like because we don't see that on the streets in Australia. So I was thinking all along that Australia were better no, I was like, no offense, but we're better than the US, but then I was talking to an ex-veteran military guy 2 days ago, and we had this exact same conversation, and I was saying to him, yeah, I think Australia is better than the US, and he goes, it's actually not. It's absolutely the same. He goes, Australia just has a better packaging around it. But he goes, being a military man myself, he goes, yeah, no, it's not. Like, we don't get that support, we don't get that service, and we don't have people that can relate to us, and take us where we're at in that point in time, and be trauma sensitive, and identify their needs and that kind of stuff. And he goes, Australia is the same, which I was really shocked by, to be honest with you, because I did think that we were a little bit better, but we're not. So I found out a few days ago.
okay? I was just kind of curious because I know that when a lot of the social justice stuff in America is the veterans are usually always the last group to be considered for
Mhm.
stuff. It's always broken homes, obviously children,
Yeah.
abused women, and then kind of like military men are like the last of the rung
And
that get
first
seen.
responders as well. And
Yes.
first, which is heartbreaking. Yeah, and I see that a lot. Like I've had ex-military, I've had vets come through. I've had ex first responders, or even first responders still in practice, I guess, come through, and they do get treated. They don't get given, I guess, the importance. They just get treated as a perpetrator after the fact. Like I was talking to one of my student counselors, and she was saying she was at a counseling like meeting with a whole bunch of other 6 other women who are also counselors, and the topic of like first responders, vets, and working with men, all of that came up, and all 6 of those women, or 7 of those women, no, 6 of the women said, I would not work with a man if if that was his background. I would refer him on. And there was
Mhm.
only one woman that said, yeah, I would work with him. So I'm just imagining in my head that man, if he wanted help, would call up, like, Google search therapists. He'd have to call up 6 counselors and get 6 knockbacks to finally get that last, bit of
Sure.
service, which is ridiculous. And we've actually contacted, like, it's called Open Arms over here, which is the vet service
Okay.
that provides counseling. Uh, but they've not been very receptive. Like, it's something I've got to chase up, but you would think they'd be receptive, because I've even said to them, listen, if the man is like unemployed, I'm even happy to offer him pro bono spots or pro bono counseling, because at the end of the day, I just want him to feel seen and heard.
Sure.
I want the families like linked to him to be safe as well, right? But yeah, they weren't very receptive. And when I was talking to this ex-military dude, he's like, yeah, that checks out.
Yeah.
He's like, the Department of Justice and also the department that handles the veteran affairs, he goes, they are just, yeah, it's like sludge, and you're
Right.
pushing rocks up a hill. So yeah, it is,
Okay.
it's tragic, and I hate that.
Sure. Now I
Yeah.
want to move on to the men that you see, and obviously you deal with a lot of the domestic violence stuff. You also probably deal with a lot of the mental health stuff.
Hmm.
How does your treatment move from somebody who is now getting past their trauma initially when they see you as quote unquote a victim of domestic violence, moving on to you starting to open up their world to mental health? What do they do after they see you? Do you work with them through that? Do you advocate for them? Do you work with other psychologists or psychiatrists? Do you like have a way for them to get in there? Like what's your avenue after they're kind of finishing up with their therapy, but you know something else is going on?
So we're pretty holistic here at SagencyWA. We actually have the men's behavior change program that runs for the 22 weeks.
Okay.
Um, and that, yeah, and you can attend that as you wish. You can attend like once a fortnight, once a week, it's up to you because it's voluntary. Then we have the counseling service, and then we also have a maintenance program. So post finishing up the men's behavior change program, if you feel like you still need ongoing servicing, we actually have the maintenance program that's 1/3 of the cost, where you can just keep attending the group. Because I find usually when men start to open up, well, I mean, they might be resistant at the start, but when they
Mhm.
open up to other men and find that they're being listened to and heard, they want to keep continuing. And one of the gaps that I did see in the not for profits was that once you finished, that was it. You couldn't do another program for 2 years or so, or a year and a half, right? Like there was a massive wait list to kind of roll back around. So we created this maintenance program where as soon as they finish the program, they can jump into the maintenance parts, keep attending the group, maintain those connections, and they're also not out of pocket like the full price. It's only 1/3 of the price. So that's kind of the support that we give them, because I see it as like mental health, trauma, relationship issues, domestic violence. It's all nuance, and it's all sort of like a puzzle that all fits together.
Okay.
So in order to work with men in those spaces, you have to be giving them the patience and time to unpack it for themselves and realize like all their different parts of themselves.
Sure. Now, as your client starts finishing up the 22-week program, are they allowed to keep in contact with you? Can you follow up
Oh,
with them? Do they refer
100%.
other men to you? Like if they have somebody else who's going through this, like can they drop your name? Like how does that work?
Yeah, absolutely. So, like, we don't actually do a lot of advertising and promo, funny enough. All of our servicing is through word of mouth, whether it's word of mouth through the family courts, or word of mouth through criminal court, or word of mouth through lawyers, or word of mouth through ex clients. That's kind of how we get our clients. Like, I've never actually been
Okay.
out there marketing and spending thousands of dollars. It was just initially like I networked with the right people, got into the right spaces like the family court and criminal court and such. But then once
Sure.
I got in there, I just let my work speak for itself. And so I'm very contactable. So even after you finish the program, or even when you're doing the individual counseling, they have my number and they can give me a call anytime. And sometimes the men will call me just to even have a chat and be like, hey, the ones that finished the program, hey, so you wrote this report for family court. Just want to let you know I got access to my kids now. So thank you for that. Or hey, I've got another assessment coming up for family court. Can I do a few more sessions with you just to prep for it because I'm nervous? And I'm like, absolutely. Or like they might just call up and be like, I'm in a tizzy. I don't know what advice to follow. Is it like my friends or my lawyer or whatever? And then I'll unpack it with them. And sometimes I'll even refer them to other lawyers to get a second opinion. So yeah, no, absolutely contactable after, because there's no closed doors as agency.
Sure. Okay,
Yeah.
so let me ask this then. You obviously have a client list and you do good and you see other people. What is the recidivism like when they leave you? Are they usually kind of on the clear path now, or do a lot of them fall back into trouble? Do they kind of take the advice and just kind of walk away with it? Do like what is your client after he leaves your office? Like what would happen to them in the system, I
Hmm.
guess is the best way to
Yeah.
ask it.
I mean, I guess the only way that I can sort of gauge the recidivism, or like gauge how much they got out of the program, is we'll write the report for them, and then it'll be the outcomes in the family court or criminal court, and how the judge or magistrate sees it, because that's going to determine whether they reoffend or not, or whether they
Okay.
disengage from their families or not. So we don't actually have a way to track that as yet, but that's something that we have been thinking about, me and my co-counsel, about how do we kind of track that, because we do get men calling us back, and the ones that do call us back aren't reoffending, and they are engaging in healthy, safe behaviors. But the ones that just finish up, and I feel like some of those guys are just like ticking boxes. And so those kinds of men, I don't know. I can probably say like those kinds of men, they probably might be like a 5 or 10% change. And studies have actually shown that when you go through a behavior change program, realistically, the chance of changing for anyone is only about a 15%. So if there's anything more than that, that's a bonus. So that's kind of how I see it.
Sure. Now, how many of the men that you see are actually coming out of a relationship where this happens versus on their own with maybe somebody else other than a spouse? Is it more than half, less than half? Like, is it mostly family related stuff?
It's about half and half. So we get guys coming through family court that have just separated or have been separated for years but are still stuck in the family court system. So we get those kinds of men. We get men that come through because they're using unsafe behaviors in their relationship, and their partners have told them to get support and seek help. We get men whose a workspace has said to them, like, you're doing unsafe behaviors, we're going to have to put you on leave until you do counseling. We get those kinds of men, and then we just get men, and particularly young men, which I actually really love to see, just going, you know what, I grew up in DV, I didn't like it, I don't want to be like my dad, I'm already noticing that I'm doing some unsafe behaviors, and I'd like to do counseling and change that. And those are the men that I actually really love in particular, because it's
Okay.
almost like you're changing that next generation.
Okay. And then the follow-up question to that is, out of those men, how many of them are drug and alcohol related incidences?
Oh, I probably would say about 60%. Like, so
So it's hot. Okay.
there'd be drug and alcohol issues in there somewhere. Not
Yeah.
necessarily massive like addictions, where if they're withdrawing, they're going to start going into like, relapsing and withdrawing and
Mhm.
having all the symptoms. But with their offending, or with their unsafe behaviors, there is usually a history of like drug and alcohol. And in particular, if I'm thinking about millennial men and higher above, if they have ADHD but it's not diagnosed, they're more likely to use things like methamphetamine or alcohol to kind of manage their symptoms. So,
Mhm.
yeah, that's kind of what I also see. And I'll often say to them, like, you're an adult now, you have adult money, you're a big boy now, you can go do your own thing, go and see your psychiatrist, and, I can
Right.
give you referrals. Let's get that happening. You don't want to do
Sure.
meth. And one of the guys I remember saying, but it's easier just to like microdose with meth. And I'm like, no, it's not, you dipshit. You're like literally
The-
going into schools and into
yeah,
hospitals and doing maintenance work. Meth is not the way to go about it. Oh my
sure.
God. Yeah. So,
Okay. Now, how is the government in Australia? Are they pro advocates for this kind of thing for counseling and abuse and mental health stuff? Or is it kind of like the US where they're kind of really behind times in terms of this? Because where we're at, our government is, we are very reactive in this kind of stuff and we
mhm.
are catching up to it now. But
Yeah.
had they had these programs implemented 30 years ago, we wouldn't be in the crisis that we are now, especially with the overcrowdedness of prisons. The
Mm.
court systems are flooded with individuals, and it's not just in one particular state. It seems to be every state is
And
dealing
even
with
like
this.
younger and younger boys offending as well, like
Yeah.
it's at a
How
higher
is
rate. Yeah.
Australia's government with that?
So I think honestly, it is the same as the US, that we are quite reactive, and I
Okay.
think that's because I think both of these two governments uh, are sort of still stuck with that Lundy Bancroft sort of narratives around domestic violence, which is like men are evil perpetrators and women are these weak victims, right? And if you don't fit into those two roles and you don't
Mhm.
agree to it, then you don't get the help. So a lot of it is reactive. And like I also find when they do campaigns for domestic violence, they always show the pointy end of it. Like, the man that's killed his partner or the man that's like punching her in the ad,
Mhm.
right? That says no to domestic violence. But most men watching that, if they're early intervention or they're early contemplative of their behaviors, they'll just look at those ads and go, well, I don't do that. So I'm not doing domestic violence. So I'm not going to ask for help. And I
Sure.
think that's the problem with those narratives, is that they're so outdated, and that, it kind of paints domestic violence to be in a particular way. And if you don't sort of fit into that, you don't get the help. They do, like our government talks all the time about increased funding for domestic violence, increased funding for domestic violence, but they don't give it to, they don't kind of share it equally. I
Okay.
find a lot of it goes towards women and children, and I absolutely agree with that. Being a woman myself and coming out of a domestic violence situation with my first ever relationship and growing up in DV, like I agree that funding should be going there, but I also think funding should be going to the men. Like for example, like if my dad had had that support, and not have
Sure.
that those negative narratives and the negative
Right.
stereotypes and stigma, my life could have been potentially different. But
Sure.
then I wouldn't be here talking to you if it was. So
Right.
life just works out in its
So
own funny way.
out of the situations that you find yourself in, how much is it of actual mental abuse versus physical abuse, right? Because the mental abuse is the stuff that people don't see, right? Where
Yeah.
they're constantly getting put down by their spouse, they're being
Hmm.
ignored, their needs aren't being met, they're not,
Hmm.
and they're year after year after year, they're just dealing with it until they break, versus somebody who just slaps their girlfriend or beats their wife, right? Like what is the mental versus physical of it? Do you see more mental sides of things or more physical or both?
So at the moment, like, so coercive control is what we call like the mental stuff now, and that's kind of coming into family court law and also into criminal law. So it's now,
Okay.
it can be a criminalized charge, even coercive control. However, the way I describe it when I talk to men, it's like you're sort of, no man wakes up and goes, I'm going to punch my wife today, or I'm going to call her a bitch or a whore, right? Like you don't just
Hmm.
wake up thinking that. It's almost like you get into a relationship, everything's great. And then you're not on the same page because you guys haven't explored that. So the first time you have a fight, you might raise your voice, and then you've crossed that one line in the sand that you never thought you would. Then the next time you have a fight, you'll raise your voice because you've already crossed that line. But now you might call her a bitch, and now you've crossed another line in the sand that you never thought you'd cross. Then the next time you get into a fight, you might yell at her, call her a bitch, and take away her bank cards or take away her car keys, right? And it's another line that you've crossed in the sand that you never thought you would. And then by the time you figure it out, you've crossed so many lines, and you're either doing sexual assault or you're beating on them, and all those
Hmm.
lines have been crossed. But it always starts off with the coercive control, and then the
Okay.
lines keep getting crossed in the sand over and over again.
Okay. So what is your male victim going through after this stuff? Is there PTSD involved in that? Is there trauma? Are they, trying to get a better headspace? Are they too far gone? Like, how does one recover from this? Or at least
So
attempt to?
I guess, like, I just wanted to clarify. So do you mean males who have been victims of domestic violence, or males who see themselves
Both.
as victims and are perpetrators? Because they're two
Both.
different things. So the
Right.
males that are perpetrators, that are using the unsafe behaviors but see themselves as victims, there's a different approach to that, which is, helping them to understand cognitive dissonance, that denying, minimizing, justifying behaviors. It's about
Okay.
helping them get perspective taking skills, helping them build on consequential thinking skills. And so that we work very differently with the man who thinks he's a victim but is the perpetrator versus the man who is the victim. Then there is a lot more scaffolding, helping him unpack his shame, understand that the shame is not his to carry, that he was a victim, helping him also unpack this man box. Because,
Hmm.
something Tony Porter talks about is that from the time you're born, all these men are given these like man boxes with all these like unspoken rules in them, and these rules become the stuff that you police yourself and what you police other men on, right? So when you are the victim in any way of domestic violence or of just even someone hitting you in like a nightclub or something,
Hmm.
that man box goes massively in question. Like, what kind of a man am I? Why couldn't I defend myself? Why didn't I do this? Why didn't I do that? You know what I mean? So for the man that is genuinely the victim, it's like, yeah, understanding, helping him understand the role of shame, helping him understand the man box, and helping him understand how trauma is not what's done to you, like Gabor Mate says, it's how your body stores the trauma or how your body interprets the trauma.
Sure.
So they're two different approaches, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I was just curious because, a lot of times, like with our perpetrators, they have to take anger management. There's like
Mm-hmm.
a series of things they have to do in order for them to be considered cleared, or I don't want to use the term fixed, but like,
Or met their treatment
stable,
needs.
right?
Like
Right.
we call them treatment needs. You have to have met
Sure.
your treatment needs. Yeah. So
S-
when the man comes into our program and gets his assessed in the intake, we determine his treatment needs, which might be like building an awareness of family and domestic violence, building an awareness of family and domestic violence and its impact on women and children, building consequential thinking, creating safe conflict management strategies, um, building on knowledge of empathy and perspective taking, understanding emotions, emotional awareness, emotion regulation. These are some of the treatment needs that we assess them for. And then we'll give them like a letter that says, you've started the program, these are your treatment needs or your treatment goals. And as you're progressing through the program, we'll let you know how you're meeting them and if you're ticking them off. So for the man that's the perpetrator, for him to sort of finish the course and get the certificate that says satisfactory, he needs to have met the treatment needs.
Okay. And
Yeah.
and as we start to wrap up now, there's we've
Mhm.
only started scratching the surface. But
Yeah.
do you have other like counselors that you network with, either in Australia or around the world, that kind of have their ideas? Do you guys have like conferences? Do you talk about like things that certain techniques that might work for individuals and share them across the globe, or is it just kind of isolated to your area? How is it in the space of other counselors and therapists?
I find because family and domestic violence and working with men in particular around relationships and mental health is such a niche space that there's not a lot of counselors that can relate. Like often I'll talk to counselors and I'll be talking about my clients, right? And they're like, don't tell me that. That's too much. That's too traumatizing. Like, I don't want to know about it. So it's actually quite hard to have those networks with other counselors, because we are such a niche, specialized space that we work in. So I'm always open to like, on LinkedIn for people to find me and talk to me, whether it's across the globe. Like I've done podcasts in the US. Um, I've done like a podcast in the UK. So I'm really happy to kind of, share the knowledge or discuss ideas and talk about like resources that we use that we can share, cross share, that kind of stuff.
Sure.
But yeah, I do find in Australia, like because and in particular in Western Australia, because we're quite an isolated city. So we're an isolated city as it is. And on top of that, because it's such a niche, specialized space, it is hard to find other counselors to network with, which is what I was kind of saying previously about how when you need to like when you need to kind of do a case formulation or pick someone's brain, you don't always have that. But now that I've got a team working around me, I kind of just use them as my main supports.
Sure. Now, without sounding too, like, I guess, egotistical, would you say you're like in the forefront of this? Are you like the pinnacle of dealing with men's? Like, are you the top tier? Like, do people come to you for advice? Do you like embrace having that role as kind of like the pioneer almost of this?
I would say, yeah, like I suffer from massive imposter syndrome, so it's really hard for me to even spruik myself, to be honest with you. Like it's
Okay,
something I'm still working on, but I would say my narratives around family and domestic violence are very different to the current narratives in Perth. So I am a different voice. So if people are looking for that different perspective of working with men in a more nuanced, holistic way that's going to create these lasting changes, they sort of approached me to be on podcasts. I've spoken at domestic violence rallies. I've emceed and presented case studies at the National Family and Domestic Violence Summit that was Australia wide. So yeah, I've done different things in this space. We are a different narrative, a different voice. So yeah, I mean, not pioneers because I mean, we still use the Duluth wheel and the cycle of violence. It's just the way we do it is
sure.
a bit different. Yeah.
Okay. So as we wrap up, where could people find you if they wanted to get in touch with you? Do you have a business email you'd like to give out? Can they find you on Facebook, social media? I know you mentioned
Yeah.
LinkedIn. Where could people find you?
Yeah. So LinkedIn, you can just find me. My name's on the screen there. I wrote it up. I guess Alison and Divine with D apostrophe VINE. You can find me at all the W's .sagencwa.com.au, which is like also on there on the bottom of the screen if you guys can see it. Um, Also Facebook. You can find me on Facebook and Instagram as well. I'm not a
Okay,
massive social media person. I mean, I should be because it's my business. But like I
sure.
said, I'm not great at like promotion. So I hardly go on those things. But when I do, like, yeah, if there's any sort of queries or you want to do counseling with us, we can always like, work out the time difference. Or if you're a therapist who wants to cross share information or resources, always happy to help.
Sure, I just want to put that out there, and I'll link everything in the bio with the video on YouTube. I just wanted to make sure because somebody watching this, down the line might say, "Oh, I was interested in this, and I didn't know this existed," and then they can get a hold of you when there's another connection made or another networking possibility.
Yeah,
So I try to use my
absolutely.
platform for the best I can. So you know,
Using your powers for good, not evil.
I try.
With great power comes great responsibility.
That is true, right? Spider-Man said something right.
No, I'm
Um,
such a geek. All the guys in group laugh at me. I'm like this neuroscience geek that
right.
tries, but it's also like mean to them. People often say, "What do you do for a job?" And I often joke and go, "Men pay me to make them cry."
Right.
And they're like, "What?" I'm like,
Fair
"No,
enough, right?
I'm a therapist. I'm not a dominatrix."
Right.
Okay.
That's awesome. Well, Ellison, thank you for being a great guest. I'd love to have you on because I know you wanted to talk about the adult ADHD and the diagnosis and stuff like that and help
Yeah.
people along that road. We didn't even stretch to that. We'd be on for another hour talking about that.
Yeah. Yeah.
We'll wrap it up for today, and then maybe down the road next month or in the near future, I'll have you back on. That way we can talk about that and your diagnosis and how you handled with that. Obviously it's pretty important to you. We talked about it and we
Yeah.
didn't even get a chance to address that. So I
Mm.
definitely want to though because I know you're passionate about it. And like I said, if we were to start talking about that now, we'd be on
Oh,
for
we'd
another
be here
hour.
all
So
day,
right.
100%. And
So
I would go off on all my ADHD side quests as I do. So we'd be here
sure.
for a whole like 20 hours. But no,
Right.
thank you so much for having me. And I'd love to share it
Absolutely.
because, part of the ADHD was like, it was eye-opening. It was liberating. But then like I always say, sorry, I'm getting a bit flustered even thinking about my ADHD and the sacrifices that it came at because
Sure.
with every coin there's like the heads and the tails. So with every positive like liberating experience there was also all the negatives that came with it,
Sure.
which we can kind of explore in another
Yeah,
episode.
I would love to do that because I would love to just talk about, how the diagnosis began and then all the steps you've taken. And there's so much that I have to ask about that. And like I said, that we just don't have time for today. But we'll wrap this podcast up now, and then I'll definitely have you back on in a little bit, and we'll talk all about that. Because like I said, I know it was, passionate for you to discuss that, and I didn't even, get a chance to bring that up. So
Oh, thank
we'll
you so
wrap.
much.
Yeah, so we'll wrap things up for the day. So, Ellison, thanks again for being a guest on the One
You
Fun Guy
guys,
podcast. Thank you guys for watching. And this video will be linked to YouTube later tonight after some editing, and I'll put all the links to the description for Ellison in the description of the video on YouTube. So, thank you again, Ellison, and we'll see you soon. Take care,
see
everybody. Have a
you.
good one.
Bye.